On the Build Show today, we're talking about an insulation strategy that's going to add both strength and resilience so this house can handle the worst that Mother Nature might throw at it. On the Build Show today, we're talking about an insulation strategy that's going to provide both strength and resiliency to this house. Now, I'm building in Austin, Texas. This is not necessarily a hurricane zone, but I'm building for a client who wanted to build traditionally using traditional methods, wood, basically framing, but wanted to build a house that really could withstand the worst that Mother Nature could hit us. Because of course he's going to live here for a long time, and we're trying to build our houses for generations, not just for a couple decades. So let's get going. We're talking specifically today about the benefits that this closed cell spray polyurethane foam is bringing to the house. Now, if you're not familiar with closed cell foam, there's two typical types of spray polyurethane foam. There's open cell foam and closed cell foam. Now this foam, because it's a closed cell foam, it's very, very rigid. If you see my finger trying to poke in there, gosh, it's got a lot of strength. It feels like you sprayed a rock into that cavity. This is kind of the same foam that they're using when you build a Yeti cooler. Very, very strong. But it also has a couple other properties that are really helping us on this house in particular when we think about strength. This foam is basically the same type of chemistry as a polyurethane glue. So if you're a woodworker and you've used, let's say, Gorilla Glue, that polyurethane glue, you know that's the strongest type of glue you can find. You've got a sister or a brother in the chemistry here where it is actually locking everything together. So when they spray this foam into the cavity, it's a two-component foam, meaning there's a part A and a part B. It mixes in a hose at a high temperature. It's about 130 degrees when it leaves the gun, and then it actually expands. Now the open cell foam expands a ton, just a huge amount of expansion. The closed cell foam, there's a little bit more density to it. This is actually what's referred to as 2-pound foam, and that's a glue that's going to lock everything together. Now as a result of that, you also got to be really careful when you're spraying this. You'll notice in the video, the guys that are spraying this have a lot of personal protection on. They've got all their clothes covered, they've got a face mask, and they're actually bringing outside air into that face mask. Be careful if you're a builder or a homeowner watching them spray the foam in your house. That airborne foam is basically like an airborne glue, and anything it's going to land on, it's going to stick to, and it's not coming off. I've actually ruined a camera and a pair of sunglasses before because of being back there taking some pictures when the guys were spraying. But what's happening is when we spray that into the cavity, that foam is physically adhering and gluing to the sheathing. We've got that Advantech sheathing on the outside of this house. And then you'll notice this house is framed traditionally, but these studs look a little different. These studs are actually an LVL stud. So this is a 2x6, standard dimensions from a typical stud, except instead of 1.5 inches, we've got 1.75 inches wide. But we framed everything on 24-inch centers, and then that polyurethane foam is actually locking everything together. It's adhering to the Advantech, it's adhering to the sides of the studs, and it's going to bring anywhere from 75 to 200% more racking strength to the house. Now we framed with LVL studs because we were looking for extreme strength in the house. But the other thing you'll notice is we've got some really beefy engineering on this house, especially the hold downs. Let's start at the foundation level. So at the foundation, we've locked the framing down with some really big hardware that's been bolted to the foundation, and then we've got multiple screws into the framing. And then as we move up the levels, you'll notice that the framing also has a lot of strapping, and where we've got a door or a window opening, everything's been strapped together with some straps. And then as we get up to the roof line, we've got a couple of things going on there. We've got some rafter ties. That's that metal rafter tie you've seen a lot in construction. We've also got a timber lock screw going up through the double top plate into the rafters. But this is the place where that closed cell foam is adding a ton of strength and uplift resistance to the house. That closed cell foam is going to attach to the top plate, to the rafters, and that decking up there. And if we had a terrible uplift and a terrible windstorm, 100-mile-an-hour winds, it's going to help lock everything together. Now the engineers designed it with hardware to do that, but again, by using the closed cell foam, we've just made those numbers that much higher. We've really got a very fortified house against some serious elements outside. Now if you didn't have the money for a full spray foam job in the whole house like we did here, we've got 2 inches basically on the walls and the roof everywhere. Another option might be to actually picture frame things. I had the guys do one rafter bay for me like this, where basically they sprayed with the gun at a 45-degree angle in between the rafter and the decking so that that spray foam would again glue that rafter and that decking together so we wouldn't have decking blow off. And they sprayed the seams on the roof as well. So where you've got your H-clips holding that plywood, or pardon me, the Advantech roof sheathing here apart from each other, that's for our expansion and contraction, they've sprayed that seam as well. So now, if the worst of weather came and somehow some part of our roof blew off, we wouldn't have all that water intake on the house because that closed cell foam is going to lock it all together. Now, I've had people in the past say they don't like to use closed cell foam in the roof line because they're worried if they got a leak they'd never see it and you'd rot out your framing. I would say there's probably some truth to that, but here's what I do. I always go in with a ice and water shield type membrane on top of my roof. And that way I know I've really got the best protection from the elements, and because it's a fully adhered membrane, it's not going to blow off even if I had some roofing blow off. Another option would be to use something like a zip sheeting on the roof that has a taped seam, because then if your underlayment blew off, let's say if you had a 15-pound tar paper, you'd still have those zip panels and that tape at the seams, which would help you with water intake. Okay, next let's talk about R value and perm rating. As I mentioned, this closed cell foam, very high R value, nearly R7 per inch. We've got 2 inches here. Check out my other video on what we did on the outside. We actually used comfort board from Rockwell on the outside, so we've got an R8 continuous on the outside. And then because we've got 2 inches here, we actually have room inside the cavity for a bat. This is what's called a flash and bat system, where we flashed 2 inches of closed cell on the inside, and then we're going to finish the cavity with a bat. We're going to be using Rockwell bats that are R15, so we're just shy of R40 in the walls. And then in the roof line, we use that 2 inches of closed cell to lock everything together and to get that structural strength. But we wanted to save a little bit of money, so we actually we're going to come in with open cell foam after that closed cell. And then we'll put that to a depth so we can achieve a total R value in the roof system of R40. Now we've got a conditioned attic in this case because we've got a lot of ducts up there. And that closed cell foam, the other big benefit of it is as long as you go an inch thick, it's a really excellent air barrier. So we're not going to have infiltration, exfiltration. This house is going to be very tight. If you do this on your house, be sure you talk to your mechanical designer because most likely you're going to drop the tonnage on your house, and that's something you need to think about. This is not inexpensive to do this on this house, but we're able to consider that as we thought about air infiltration rates and the excellent amount of insulation on the outside of this house. We're basically building it like a Yeti cooler, and as a result I've been able to reduce the mechanicals. We're somewhere around 1,200 square feet per ton of air conditioning on this house. And compare that to a traditional house in Texas that maybe is 500 or 600 or 700 square feet to the ton. That's some big savings overall, not only in energy use, but in equipment costs. Another property about closed cell foam that you want to know about is it's going to give you a vapor barrier as long as you spray it an inch thick. So that's why you often see the flash and bat method. It's not going to allow water vapor to condense on the back of your sheathing because the vapor will not permeate through the closed cell foam as long as it's an inch thick. We talked about how the closed cell foam gives us racking strength and uplift resistance in the roof line. One other thing I wanted to mention when we talk about strength, I've got a builder friend of mine, Foster in New York City, who actually uses closed cell spray foam underneath his stairs. I've not seen that before, but I think I'm going to start doing that, where he's actually spraying the bottom side of his wood stairs to really lock everything together. It's that extra squeak protection and glue so those stairs are super solid. What a great idea. Big thanks to Foster. Thanks for joining me, guys, as we talked about the huge strength and resiliency benefits of closed cell spray polyurethane foam. Big thanks to my sponsor on this video, Acela. They're the manufacturer that actually makes this spray foam. And also to Best Insulation. That's my contractor here in Austin that actually has several locations around Texas. So link to both the manufacturer and my applicator in the description below. And lastly, I want to say thanks to Dry Duck. We got a great load of Build logoed clothing from Dry Duck. They make some awesome workwear. And I've actually got a coupon code, link in the description below. So if you're interested in checking out some Dry Duck apparel for you, you can get a discount just by being a Build Show watcher. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Otherwise, we'll see you next time on The Build Show.